Hello everyone, Ariam here, and we are back with another Dinosaur Days episode. This time a special feature about two of the dinosaurs that best encapsulate the phrase, "I'm gonna throw hands." Deinocherius is a genus of large ornithomimosaurs from the late Cretaceous. Ornithomimosaur, while being a complete mouthful that caused me to re-record this section multiple times, actually just means dinosaurs that mimicked birds. Ornith, meaning bird, mime, meaning mimic. When you hear ornithomimosaur, if you're familiar with how dinosaur naming works, you might think of Ornithomimus, which was a much smaller, more ostrich-sized and ostrich-like dinosaur, similar to Struthiomimus or Gallimimus. If you remember the first Jurassic Park movie, the very fast, agile, skinny dinosaurs that the Tyrannosaurus ambushes would be a good example of this clade. So clearly, these dinosaurs evolved down to be much smaller, much lighter, and much, much faster. Now, with a genus name like Ornithomimosaur, you would be correct in assuming that these giants did share many similarities with modern-day birds. First things first, the skull of the animal ended in a bill or a beak, something you might see on something like a goose, rather than the typical mouth that you think of when you think of dinosaur. Additionally, its bones were hollow, and most of these hollow bones also had compacted air sacs within them. This would have lightened up this bulky dinosaur significantly and given it a wider range of motion. These hollow bones were probably the saving grace of this animal because upper estimates put them at around 35 feet long and around 6.5 tons, so these were big dudes. And these hollow bones may have also helped them with a semi-aquatic or near-aquatic lifestyle, which we'll discuss later. Finally, the vertebrae at the very end of the Deinocherius's tail are set up in a way that suggests that there was extra weight or movement requirements there, suggesting the possibility of a fan of tail feathers. But I picked Deinocherius because I wanted to talk about its arms and its hands, not its feathers. The arms of this animal alone were about 8 feet long, with 3 fingers on each hand that had large but blunt claws. The size and structure of the arm and shoulder bones that have been discovered for this genus suggests that these arms were very strong. Additionally, inside that bill, the teeth of the Deinocherius suggest that it ate both plant matter and shellfish or mollusks and potentially even fish. So what does all of this mean? Well, put together, this is essentially a gigantic prehistoric Canada goose that has the added abilities of crushing shellfish and having grabby hands. Honestly, if that doesn't strike fear directly into your heart, I don't know what will. I can't imagine anything scarier than a Canada goose with knives. But arms meant for rooting around for underwater vegetation, mollusks, or even catching and holding fish would definitely have been able to slap you into the next lifetime. However, Deinocherius is only one of the 2 animals being discussed in this video. Next is the much more infamous Therizenosaurus. Therizenosaurus is an absolute beast of an animal, with upper range estimates putting it at around 30 feet long, 16 feet tall, and over 5 tons. But, like we talked about in our Kentrosaurus video, take a look at the head-to-body ratio of this animal. This is an almost purely herbivorous creature. So why then did this herbivorous animal with a beak and teeth that were only good for grinding up plant matter have claws that were over 20 inches long? Well, the leading theory is that this was an advantageous evolution for feeding behaviors, something that would have convergently evolved in the giant ground sloths from the Pleistocene period. Basically, those giant claws would have been used like hooks to grab high branches in trees and pull them down so that the Therizenosaurus, or later the giant ground sloths, could reach leaves that were not being competed for by other herbivores. But, I mean, come on, those are like 3-foot claws. Wouldn't that be more deadly than the Deinocherius, who only had smaller, more blunt claws? Well, Always a good life lesson to remember: size isn't everything. There isn't sufficient evidence one way or the other to say for sure whether or not Therizenosaurus's long claws would have had the tensile strength to stand up to combat level situations. I'm absolutely certain that if anything dared to threaten this giant 16-foot tall murder turkey, that they would have used the claws in a threat display. But I'm not sure if there's enough evidence to suggest that these claws would have been useful in combat and wouldn't have chipped or broken. So, unfortunately, no spoilers from me, but there's not really evidence that I've seen yet that suggests the Therizenosaurus would have been capable of the type of stabbing from the Jurassic World Dominion movie. Speaking of the Jurassic World Dominion Therizenosaurus, they did actually give him little feather follicles, which I thought was interesting. While no specimens of Therizenosaurus have been found with feather imprints, their relatives and relative species have been found with feather imprints, and their distance relative to modern birds on the genetic tree suggests that feathers are a pretty good bet for this species. I obviously went with a much less conservative amount of feathering compared to the Jurassic Park Dominion Therizenosaurus, but I'm proud of them for actually giving him little feather follicles. Even if I think he's kind of an ugly cute, like I love him, but he is kind of ugly, I think it's because he reminds me of a baby pigeon. That'll go ahead and wrap up today's comparison video. Who do you think had the strongest slap in the prehistoric kingdom? I don't think it's quite as easy a win for Therizenosaurus as some people might think. Regardless, none of us will ever have to encounter the tickle chicken from hell or the Canada goose from your nightmares, and I think that's all the more reason to remember to smile.